myself. And this film really has a lot of real life experiences in it. And so as you watch this film, you will see some of the things that I went through in my own personal life growing up. And this film is about a girl who is trying to find her way. And so I hope that you guys enjoy it. And I would love to talk about it with you guys afterwards just to see how you feel about it. So thank you so much for coming, and I appreciate it.
Thank you both so much for joining us.
Long day. Thank you so much for having me.
Earlier, Angelica, you were talking about how some of the experiences that you had growing up informed the story in this movie. So tell us, I guess, about how you started to write that story and how the two of you found each other and decided to work on it together.
Yes, well, Jordana, we met through a mutual friend, Zaid. Jordana used to work at, I don't know if you want to tell your side of it, but Jordana used to work at, she used to volunteer at a nonprofit called Peace for Kids. And basically Peace for Kids is a place where they provide resources and a community for foster youth. And I used to be one of the people in the program. So I was in accounting, and I had declared that I wanted to be a writer and that accounting wasn't for me. And the moment that I had said that, Zaid said, hey, I know Jordana Spiro. She is working on a film about a former foster youth whose dad murdered their mother, and I feel like you guys would be able to work on something together. So originally I was supposed to be a consultant on the film because I was in foster care, so I had some experiences, and she was looking to link with a foster youth who could inform some of those experiences. And so we met at a cafe, and I remember she gave me an opportunity to write a scene of the movie, and I did, and then from that day she was like, well, let's write this together. So that's kind of how we met. Yeah.
So then what was the genesis for you?
For me, it was, a couple of, and the weirdest thing, by the way, about this was, when I had reached out to Zaid, I had named the character Angel, which was very bizarre when he said, I think Angelica might be an interesting person for you to meet. And I think that's my favorite thing about filmmaking is these incredible coincidences and alignments that happen along the way. For me, a couple of different things were kind of converging at once. I was just feeling very at a crossroads in my life and really a bit lost and not sure of my direction. And I just started to think about a character who might attach themselves to a purpose that's self-destructive just to be able to wake up in the morning and have a purpose. And at the same time I was volunteering with the foster youth and hanging out with them and in Peace for Kids, and I just, when I started to learn about the aging out process, I just felt like I was standing with these young people who were significantly cooler, braver, far more interesting than me, and is there some way to bring this idea that I was having and this world and this set of challenges together. So I kind of developed the bones of the story, kind of an outline, and then when I went to write it, I felt like I felt irresponsible writing it myself without really incorporating somebody who could really speak to the subtlety and the nuances of what that experience is like. I didn't want to be yet another person who misrepresented it, and so that's when I reached out to Zaid. And as Angelica said, like at first I didn't even really know, was I looking for somebody to just read the scenes with me, and I would do the writing and just read the scenes and tell me if something, if they flagged something that didn't feel right. But then when Angelica and I met and we started talking, I sensed her passion for writing, and that we had a real kind of kinship in the kinds of ways that we wanted to express ourselves. That's when I just said, like, hey, take a shot at this, and I was just curious to see, like, where where she was in sort of her kind of writing process, and then from there it was just clear that this should just be a partnership from now on.
So give us a sense of the things that came out of the collaboration. What were some of the things that were missing that, that Angelica brought to the story, or the characters, or the nuances you mentioned?
I guess I'll speak on that. I think that, some of the things that you see in there are things that foster youth can directly relate to, like the black binder. If you were ever in foster care, anyone in foster care, that black binder is so symbolic of our experience. Your whole life is in that binder, from when you were a child, all of your school records, your medical records, your psychological records, everything is in this book, and anybody that opens it has access to your life, some of your secrets and things that you're embarrassed of, or whatever it is. And so that was something that a lot of foster youth who watch this can relate to. And even some parts where you look at it and you see the real daughter's room in the house, where that's an experience that a lot of foster youth can relate to as well. When you're in these foster homes, sometimes the real daughter's room is like she's by herself, and I don't know if that's for just to make the real child feel special, or or to not be forgotten. But in doing so, a lot of times, we feel like we're on a different tier, I guess, in the home. And so it's just little things like that you can that I can pull from being in foster care, and those things that a lot of other foster youth have gone through that can make it even more authentic, I would say.
Jordana, you mentioned that this was a crossroads in your life, but obviously, I'm sure since you started working on this, you then got cast in Ozark, which has been phenomenal, and we've got another season coming out. So give us a sense of the how long this project has been on your mind, because it seems like you're having a really good couple of years.
Thank you. I guess I started working on it around, when I went to Columbia, I applied in 2009, and this was part of my portfolio. A description of this film was part of my portfolio. So you were like 5 years old. But I would say that it kind of kicked into high gear, let's say, and became, not just something that you're sort of percolating and kind of dabbling in, but became like a real active, part of your everyday, where you're spending hours on it every single day. In like 2000, when did it go to the labs? 2000. So beginning of 2013.
And you took this to the Sundance Lab?
Right. Yeah.
Tell us a bit about that experience. What sort of feedback did you get? What was the most sort of insightful thing that you heard, or something outrageous that didn't help? Two really nice things came out of it. I think, a lot of nice things came out of it, and especially, in fact, much more than even just the writing process per se, the kind of support that they gave us. I mean, I can say for sure that I wouldn't have been able to get the film made without their support, in terms of access to funding and access to mentors and things like that. So I'm really grateful for what they did. The labs, and specific to our writing process, one of the biggest things that came out of it for us is that we hadn't really grounded the film in a sense of place, and it was very insular in one city, and then through Sundance then introduced us to Cinereach, which is another incredible organization that I
encourage any aspiring or filmmaking filmmakers, not aspiring filmmakers, here to check them out. Center Reach, yeah, they're in New York, and they do a lot of great work. They gave us a development grant, and that allowed us to work together. I asked Angelica to come out to New York because I had just had a baby. So I knew that I was going to need to set the film on the East Coast, just because the kind of casting I wanted to do, the kind of location scouting I wanted to do, I just needed to be near my house, because I knew that was going to be a really long search, and I just had to be near home base with the baby. So when we were working together in New York post the labs, we got stuck, and we decided to take a road trip to Philadelphia. And just in that car ride alone, I tell you, guys ever have writer's block? Just get in a car, get in some moving vehicle, because something happened, you know? Do you remember that? And
it was not only that, it was important because in the trip, in the movie, they do a trip on a bus. Because of that, because we were just driving down the highway and we were looking at the scenery. We were like, well, because we were like, where are we going to get these characters? How are we going to get them out of where they are? You know what I mean? And because we were,
and all of a sudden our ideas were going, they were like, oh
we were like, maybe we should go on a trip. Because that's what we were doing, you know, so that definitely helped. And and you talk about like some of the conversations that happened at Sundance, which it was good because we had so many great directors and writers picking apart the script from they literally just picked it apart. And one of the biggest questions were, should she kill the dad or should she not? I think, did we go in there?
And also I should say Quentin Tarantino was one of our advisors.
And
so he's like, yeah, she's got to kill the dad. She's got to kill him.
Yeah. I think did we go into Sundance with a script where she killed the dad? I think we did. Or I'm not sure.
But we were really battling that. And we were really battling that because what we didn't want was this kind of classic tale of forgiveness. We didn't really want her to forgive the dad. We don't feel like she needs to forgive herself and move on herself. And if that means for her choosing to never want to see the father again, then that's her choice. But that she was released. That was really important to us. But at the time we were kind of only seeing it as like forgiveness or kill him. And the forgiveness wasn't sitting right with us, but of course killing him, wouldn't be a great thing for her to do. And obviously would only ruin her own life and her sister. So, but we were also interested in that point of like exploring somebody who did totally fall through the cracks.
And telling that story because, so often you see people fall into the cracks, you don't see the story behind it and you don't get to humanize that person. But I think that for us, the biggest thing was learning how to listen to our inner voice and the story that we wanted to tell in the midst of so many famous directors and writers who were so successul in their opinions of what story you should tell.
There's not a lot of forgiveness in Quentin's scripts. But for me, that final scene with the dad, it's not, it really doesn't feel in any way like forgiveness, but that she realizes that in order to be there for her sister, she has to, first of all, not kill him, but then it sort of shifts the dynamic. The first words out of her mouth when she's got the gun is like, she's not going to come here, right? Like it's about being a parent to her sister. But switching to a film that's on the road is a big structural change. I think one that works very well in the movie. What was what sort of was the general structure before that?
It was a similar structure, just that, and also we were writing it in our minds because Peace for Kids was a kind of a common ground for us. we were writing it with Los Angeles in mind. So they did go to the beach, but it didn't have that same. It just didn't have that same sense of movement. So then setting it in Philadelphia, when we were there, when we were driving around and all this stuff, all these locations that we were seeing started to make things feel specific and rooting things in rooting scenes in real places. So like the Strawberry Mansion Bridge and things like that. That allowed us to kind of get a lot more specific with what's going on in that scene and where she might go after.
And we walked the streets of Philadelphia too. We loved the buildings and the color. I know that Jordana had a lookbook of all these places that she loved in Philly, and just what she wanted the film to look like. And Philly was a beautiful place. It was a beautiful place.
Tell us about casting your two leads. I guess if you're not in LA, you're probably not looking at too many sort of child actors or you sort of being groomed for careers the same way.
Well, New York has a lot of them, of course, because of theater. And also there's such a big industry in New York as well. But I did a short film prior to this called Skin, where I worked with two 11-year-old kids. And I found that when I went the more sort of traditional road of casting with agencies, I felt like a lot of the kids there were giving their parents performance because they were really kind of doing it by rote, and they could hit their mark perfectly, and they could do everything perfectly, and these perfect smiles, perfect haircut, and everything like that. And I didn't feel a kind of a real sort of scrappy, feet on the ground kid. So I did a street casting approach on that short film, and I really loved working with the two kids that I worked with on that film, and I felt really good about that experience, and I felt like I had a way, like I felt like I had kind of created a little bit of a method in working with kids that had never acted before. So I had a sense that we were going to find Abby that way. So over the course of about a year, we saw probably like 700 or 800 kids for Abby, auditioning them very thoroughly as well. Like, so every Saturday, thank goodness for public libraries, because of course we had like no money, and so public libraries really opened their doors for us to be able to use like whatever their rec rooms and stuff for auditions, because it's really hard to tell a kid that you meet on the street to meet you anywhere but a library. So we would go to libraries like every single. So we would do the scouting all week, putting flyers up, going to schools, going to community, all different kinds of community groups, and then on the weekends we would hold auditions. And of course, you don't know if it was a 7-year-old, 8-year-old, 9-year-old, 10-year-old, if they could read. We didn't know, so we didn't want to just give them and just giving a kid a scene that's never acted before, it doesn't tell you anything about what they can bring to the table. They don't know what any of that means, so we would do improvisations, Tatum, Marilyn Hall, who plays Abby, we actually scouted her at a step competition in the Bronx. And that she had never acted before. Coincidentally, her great-grandmother is Marilyn Coleman, the actress from Good Times. So it's in her blood. As her father, who cannot act, says, it skipped a couple generations. But anyway, so that's how she came about. Dominique Fishback, who many of you might recognize from The Deuce on HBO right now. She and I actually did an episode of Royal Pains together, and I delivered her baby. And as I was delivering her baby, I was like, she's really good. And I had Angel in my mind, but we weren't nearly ready to cast her because I knew I needed to find Abby first, and so we. But I kind of kept in touch with her, and then she said that she had written and was performing her one-woman show called Subverted, where she played 22 different characters. So I went to go see that. I was like, one of them's got to be Angel, and she just blew me away. And so when our sort of main casting director came on board, it was kind of funny because I wrote her an email saying, like, right when she started, I wrote her an email saying, like, hey, could you make sure you reach out to Dominique Fishback and ask her if she will come in and audition? And at the same time, she was sending me Dominique Fishback's audition tape and saying, this is the first person I thought of. She's incredible. I'm a huge fan, and I'd love to support her career. And so that was a kind of another beautiful coincidence.
Well, they're both wonderful in the film. Obviously, Dominique's got some seasoned acting experience, but to bring someone in that hasn't acted before, there's any number of, I'm sure, like, concerns you might have to sort of capture that spontaneity. So I'm curious to know what you were looking for that you saw in Tatum. That you, I mean, 800 auditions is a staggering amount of people to see. What was different?
Well, first of all, they say 90% of directing is casting, and I really believe that. I mean, I think that you have to find the right person, and of course, there's a wide range of ability that they can. I mean, Dom is nothing like Angel. She's gregarious and bounces into the room and is always laughing and super jovial, and for Angel, she had to be completely shielded. So it's not to say that somebody can't transform it. You're finding that kind of essence that is the right temperature. And in Tatum's case, she's so smart, and she, like, my casting director, I remember, like, she has like a lot of piercings and a mohawk and a flannel shirt and everything, and Tatum, like, sat down. We kind of explained to her the idea of the improv, and we said, Tatum, do you have any questions? And she's like, yeah. And she looked at the casting. She's like, "Are you a vegetarian?" and Marlena was like, "Yeah, I am." And then she's like, oh, "Okay, I was wondering about that." And you just see, like, her thoughts were, like, just going. You know what I mean? She's just wanted, like, I'm curious about what's going on over there and what's going on over there. Like, she's just so hungry for details. And she's charismatic and funny and just so bright. And then at the same time has this beautiful vulnerability and this incredible kind of ability beyond her years to tap into some very difficult emotions. So to be able to have both of those things in one little 9-year-old body is kind of an extraordinary thing. And then those dimples.
Yeah.
I mean, the dimples are ridiculous.
Well, I mean, even when you find someone who gives you all of those qualities, actually, getting that performance on film isn't necessarily an easy task. I mean, there could be a lot of to put that together. Was it lightning in a bottle, or did you find that you have to do a lot of work? I mean,
Jordana's an actress as well, so I think that was a benefit for her as well, because she's an actress. So a lot of times, like, I know when I went to go. She invited me for a week to see, kind of shadow her and look at her when she was that right. Well, not look at her, but like to look at her direct to experience it. And she used a lot of her own skills that she has to be able to help them as well. So I think that was a benefit there too.
Thank you. Yeah, when you're making a film on such a small budget, it's really obviously important, I guess in any budget, but especially when you're really kind of, rubbing nickels to really know where you want your money spent. And And for me, I knew because the film really totally relies on the performance of these two young women. I mean, if there is no film if that relationship doesn't work. And it doesn't matter what the locations look like. It doesn't matter what camera you shot it on. If that relationship doesn't work, you have nothing. If that relationship works, you could have filmed it on your iPhone. So I knew that I wanted to put my money into having time. So take it away from any fancy camera equipment, take it away from, you know, anything that was not essential, and put a lot of time into it. So one of the things we did is we had a long rehearsal process. And in that rehearsal process, we were really able to dig into each scene and understand what each scene was about, build a real sister relationship for the two of them, and yeah, so that was really important. And then on set on the day for those emotional scenes, it's just, you know, it's kind of trying to grab at like any little thing that's, you know, any little thing that you can, like for instance that the scene on the street when Tatum says, "You left me." Tatum was she did one take really beautifully, and it was because I had said to her, she had great, really supportive parents, and I said to her, you know, parents, I said, you know, if I feel like I want to kind of, you know, push her into an emotional place, never mean or anything like that, that just wouldn't be in my nature, but just sort of dig around there a little bit, like, are you comfortable with that? Is that cool? And like, what advice do you have for me? Is there anything that Tatum really responds to? And because I knew there was this big emotional scene coming up, and he's like, and he's like a football player, you know, like, and he's like, you know, here's what I tell her. I tell her you got to leave it on the field. And is he like, you know, he boxes with her and stuff. Like, he's a really sweet dad. So she did the first take, and it was like, okay, but I knew she had more stuff in her. And so I just said, Tatum, and I felt so dumb. I was like, Tatum, I really need you to leave this on the field. And she's like, I got it. And she went out there and like busted out this incredible take. And the one take I knew, because she's such a daddy's girl, I knew, like, instead of getting nervous that her dad would be watching, that she would perk up because she wants to make him proud. So one take I said, like, I asked him to go behind the monitor and watch, and I said, hey, your dad's watching this one, and she was like, okay, cool. And it got her. So it's just sort of like trying to find what each actor needs specifically, you know. Or there was one day where Dom, you know, because Tatum had created such a close relationship with Dom, and there was a little bit of that like big sister kind of hero worship going on, where Dom is just like on this pedestal for her. Dom needed to stay in character a lot, so in between takes she would go and stay in character, and Tatum, because she's just 9, was like, I think Dom's mad at me. So one take I would said, instead of saying Angel when you have to get mad, say Dom, because you're mad at her, because you're upset, because you feel like she's like abandoning you. And so she did that. Dom was like, what the, you know. I probably should have told Dom before the take that was going to happen. But it's just like, it's finding what might work for your actor.
Tell us a little bit about the way in which you decided to portray the dad. You know, to some extent, it's ambiguous, you know, in terms of the actual crime that's committed. You know, it sort of sets so much of Dom's story into motion. But then I feel like when we get to the end, more than anything, we feel sadness than hate. And I'm curious a little bit about how that character was shaped, the decisions you made in terms of how you know, how much you were going to tell us about what actually happened between the parents. Just thoughts.
Well, I mean, first of all, I had a similar. My mom died because of domestic violence at the hands of my father, and my father was a very smart, manipulative type of man, you know, and so I think that for the father, it was a combination of characters that we kind of wanted to portray in him, which was that they could. Her mother was a paralegal, you know what I mean? So like my mom was a nurse, just trying to, not the stereotypical, background that a lot of people would expect former foster youth to come from, but that, and then to portray some of his manipulation. The father was very manipulative, as you can see in their conversation with each other, and just the way he was interacting with her, and he was a smart man, and just definitely some of that was put into him. And then also Jordana had her own experiences, family experiences, where she was, it was just a character that we built based off of our experiences, I would say, and what we wanted to portray.
Yeah, I mean, when we do see him, I feel like there is, just based in terms of the representation of him in that scene, if I'm reading too much into this, please stop me. But it seems like you resist the urge to have him be this like embodiment of evil, that's sort of going to allow her to potentially fulfill this sort of revenge motive.
It would have been too easy. I think we discussed that. But if he was so evil, it would have been too easy. So we wanted to portray him as someone who we could almost see as human.
Mm-hmm.
Was much harder, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, she said it succinctly.
So now, once you actually had the script in shape, give us a sense of the challenges of getting it into production.
Again, I mean, this was like from 2013 until now, pretty much 7 days a week what I was doing. We looked for funding everywhere. It's not that bad, guys. No, I'm kidding. It was easy. It was really easy. The money just flowed right in. When you have an industry that is, totally organized around supporting new female voices and women of color, the money just really pours in. Yeah, it was. I spent the 2 years going to pretty much like every single production company. I have the privilege of being at a very fancy agency because of my acting career, and through them $0 came, and there was just no, and it wasn't, it's not even knocking against them, because they were setting up meetings for me to meet with people. It's just that production companies want to see a bottom line on paper. They want to see that that actor can bring in that much money, that genre can bring in that much money, and we couldn't do that. And we really wanted to make a piece of art, and that's one of the tricky things about our film industry in this country, is it is a totally commercial enterprise. And so we ended up, through a mix of grants, private funding, support again, and this is where Sundance was very key for us. Through a mix of a lot of different things, we were able to bring in the money. But yeah, it was a pretty relentless thing, but it was possible. And that's the positive side of it, is in fact it is possible. It's just sort of, it just becomes a question of like how high you want to roll up your sleeves, but it is possible. And there are people out there who are committed to helping make stories, helping make movies that showcase a wider range of storytelling and talent on screen.
And of course, making the film is only one component of the real battle, which is getting the film seen. So the fact that you've got theatrical distribution with Samuel Goldwyn, people will get to see this on a big screen. Tell us a little bit about finding the distributor and what considerations you had in terms of, you know, the strategy for getting the film out there. I mean, as opposed to a purely online platform.
For me, I felt like, well, I had, you know, we were thinking about just a pure online platform, and from what I was learning or researching, that that's a really strong way to go if you have a star. And it's not to say that Dom isn't a star, but she's like one step away from people being like, oh, that's the Dominique Fishback film. You know what I mean? So as of right now, like her name alone wouldn't necessarily be able to like cut through, you know, the millions of films that are out there. And then also, this is just what I was learning about. And then also, if you have like a strong genre. So any of those things that make people say like, oh, I gotta drop what I'm doing right now and watch this movie on my phone. So that's, so again, like Sundance as mentors was very helpful to us to say like, the film will work because of word of mouth. And the way you'll get word of mouth is also by getting reviews, and the way you get reviews if you get into theaters. So you have to prioritize even getting the tiniest, most limited theater run. You have to prioritize getting that theater run, because you need that credibility, you need that possibility to have any kind of awards run. You know, that kind of thing. So that was our main goal, is to make sure that we were going with somebody that, you know, even if it wasn't a wide release, would at least give us a little bit of theater presence to legitimize us and bring some attention to us.
It's opening at the
Lumley's North Hollywood.
North Hollywood. Does anyone want to jump in? Yeah.
I thought it was shot real good, and I liked your soundtrack.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Do you want to talk? Oh, sorry. I mean, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the music?
Me?
Yeah.
Sure. So some of the score was, I really loved this band called Alluvium, and I found myself writing a lot to them, and then we put one of their songs in the script. And the beautiful, because what I wanted to do was kind of create this sparse landscape, but one that had a lot of texture. And so I just felt like his music did that. It's sort of like, it's ambient music, but it's sophisticated, and so, you know, so I reached out to him as a kind of a fan, and I was sort of shocked when he was like, sure, and I sent him a rough cut and, you know, asked him if he would be interested in working on the film, and I was shocked that he was, and so he gave us, like, he actually scored for the film, which was really exciting. And then a lot of the music that's going on, like in the scenes, like in the background, like the kid that's singing to the song. Well, that's this young artist out of Philadelphia named Jules. And the cool way that came to us is when I was scouting for Abby's house in Strawberry Mansion, or in West Philly. There was this woman on the street who was entering her house, and she was looking at me like, oh my God, is this like another real estate broker? And I said, I promise I'm just trying to make a movie, and it's a small movie. And all of a sudden she could see that I was being honest, and her name is Joy Williams, and she became our kind of guardian angel, and helped us find all these beautiful locations in Philadelphia. And her cousin is Jules, and so I hooked up with him, and he gave us all awesome music. He gives, there's like 4 tracks that we use of his. And then coincidentally, I told Tatum where her house was going to be, is 52nd and Masters. That's her house as Abby. And she said, 52nd and Masters, I grew up there. And I knew that she had spent like some time in Philly. She said, yeah, I spent all my summers as a kid there in Philly on 52nd and Masters. And then I said to Bo, her dad, I was like, wait, he's like, Joy Williams, that's my girl. And so then when we were shooting there, they had like a block party for Tatum and everything like that. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. So another really nice coincidence. Sorry, yes.
2 things. What was your budget, and how come you didn't let the dad apologize?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Our budget was under $1 million. And I'm told by my producers that that's what I'm supposed to say. And that's true, but I'm like not supposed to give an exact announcer's math out of it. That's over my head. Anyway, why did we have the dad apologize?
I think I want to speak on that.
Yeah, please.
I think that it showed Angel's strength, because not always, in life we don't always get apologies. We don't always get closure the way we see it or the way that we want it. And so for her to be able to move on and to choose to live and to choose to really, mend her relationship with her sister and to heal without that apology is something that's really commendable on her part.
I just had a quick question touching back on that. Did you do that on purpose, where the last thing he said there was like, what else do you want from me? Turning it to like a selfish way of him? Was it like, cause it's like a very selfish thing to ask? Kinda, I don't know, cause it seemed like, he seemed like a warm guy, and then once stuff hit the fan, it kind of turned back to, kind of made you hate him at the end, right?
Well, so he admits it.
Yeah.
And I think he wanted to think that that would come with some big, like, epiphany kind of beautiful moment from her. And she didn't need him to admit. She knows. He was the one that was living in denial. She wasn't. So that for me was a moment where, and then Dom did this totally spontaneous thing where she just let out that scream, which none of us were expecting. And even on set, I was like, okay, that was cool. Now let's do it again. And then in the editing room, I was like, wait a second, let's go back to that. Like there's something really beautiful in that. That seemed, to be honest, like really started to make sense to us a lot in the editing room. We actually did a lot of like, do you remember how many versions I sent you of that? Let's see. A lot of like actually totally moving lines around and seeing how we can make the conversation different. And in fact, like what we had on paper, like I think we just did this like crazy cut and pasting of all these different lines, because I think it gave it some kind of like there was all this other stuff going on underneath it that felt really necessary. It just felt much more layered to do that.
And I also think it was good for Angel, for him to ask that question, for her to sit in reflection and actually think about what it is that she wanted from him. And at that moment, she realized that there was nothing that he could give her. You know, because I think throughout the whole film, she was thinking that there was something she can get from that moment. And then when she finally got there, and he said it, and he admitted it, which was what she already knew, she was like, you know what, there actually is nothing that I need from you, you know what I mean? And that was, to me, a turning point for her.
And piggyback off of that question there. First of all, I love the performances and the characters are really rich, but I did notice that how pretty much all of the men were negative. And in the labs, and that was a pretty interesting choice. Did you ever get any pushback for that, or was that a conscious choice?
I mean, I feel like we talked about that. Yeah.
I don't find the PO to be bad. Personally, I think he's as we have him portrayed. I think he's jaded, and I think he is in fact actually saying what he means. Different than everybody else that feeds her just bullshit.
Yeah, he's unsympathetic.
Whether we like him or not, he is actually saying what he thinks is true. And I wanted us to be able to leave an opening of hopefulness, actually, in fact, in that character. Because not hopefulness, not that he's going to be her savior or anything like that. I really didn't. We talked a lot about that. We didn't want that because that's not realistic. But that he would be practical enough that the next day, when Angel goes back and says, like, all right, I'm showing up, you know, can we not arrest me? That he would be able to see the fact that she showed up the day later. That there would be enough humanity in him to recognize that was a big step for her. So I didn't see him per se as all bad, but I know we didn't want anybody in the film to be a savior to her. We wanted her to be a savior to herself and her little sister to be her savior. That was important to us.
Was the opening sequence, was that section longer? Was it something that you had to really work and refine to get it down to what it was?
That was a lot of work. Yeah, I think there was like 50 drafts of that scene. You know, it's a tricky balance because I think me by proxy and she, we have a lot that we wanted to express and say about what a young person might go through and what that environment might feel like in those conversations and all of the millions of ways that they're hit with so much injustice. But it's trying to find that line of wanting to share all of that, and also you can't become a pamphlet either. Like you can't become you can't preach. You know what I mean? Like you can't.
We talked about giving the audience credit. We did.
Yeah.
We tried to balance how much credit should we give the audience, like how much would they be able to get on their own, and not knowing, but trying to write it and give them the perfect balance was also something that we had to go back and forth on. But I think a lot of the advice we got from people who read the script and the notes we got helped to kind of reduce that part.
Well,
Yeah.
the same thing in not knowing the specificity of the murder. We never really know how that went down, and that's very central. And the fact that we don't know how it went, how it happened, is intriguing. I mean, it keeps us involved, and by not answering it, it takes the film to a whole different.
Thank you so much. We put it, in fact, we had different drafts where we went into the specificity more. And we just felt like it sort of kept pulling the focus into like, almost like we're explaining it so that you know that we know what happened, and it's like it's not about that. The story's about
The people in the story do need to discuss it.
right, exactly, yeah.
Yes.
I just want to say this film is really incredible and really well written and original. And one of the things that really struck me was like just how organic Angel and Abby's characters were. Like they really didn't feel like, even though you guys said they were sort of based on your experiences a little bit, they didn't feel like a self-insert of the writer, like they felt like real people. And I was wondering what your process was in coming up with those characters and like their personality traits and how they react to different situations, and like how much you thought about like their lives and brains. And I was just wondering like what that process was, because you said that this film started from like you wanted a character who was at a crossroads, and I was wondering how that sort of all developed into like these two very like fully fleshed out people.
Thank you, first of all. Do you want to? I don't want to jump in.
Oh no, I mean, so I would say some of the first of all, we had to break down the characters, who they were. I mean, we went into, remember we did that exercise of what her favorite color was, you know what I mean? Like, we really had to break down who the characters were, and over the course of years, we got to know Angel. Like, we knew what Angel was like and what she would do and what, you know what I mean, how she would act and respond to certain things.
I mean, like a time chart of like when she was born, which house she went to then, and then she was at that house for 3 months, and then that house for 6 months, and that with it, like so also for me, who's coming into it from the outside, I could at least, almost like an acting exercise, try to imagine that journey with as much detail as I possibly could.
And there was a lot of, I mean, you didn't feel the self-insertion, but Jordana had experiences with her sister, you know what I mean, that we talked about over the table, and then I had experiences with my sister that we talked about that allowed us to write about sisters and how sisters act, and, you know, and things of that nature. And so I think that
There's like 48 sisters between the two of us.
Yeah.
So
I have 4 sisters. She has a million sisters. So
in fact, at first, there's so many, like, it's, yeah, you don't want to get us together and get us all going. Yeah. But just to jump, not to jump on you, but like initially she had a little brother.
Yeah, she did. It was supposed to be a little brother,
Isaac.
And we were like,
Isaac.
Okay, let's just switch it to sisters, because we know that we don't.
Well, it was the mentor Rani. He's like, I don't understand. Your co-writer has a bunch of sisters. You have a bunch of sisters. Why are you writing about a sister and a brother? And I was like, yeah. And then I came home because you were staying with me at that time, and they ran home, and I was like, what if we make it 2 sisters? And then you were like, you remember you said like, you could remember you said. Oh, you. And then she was like, I like it. But it can't be like Big Ho, Little Ho. But you know, because we were. I was like, yeah, it totally won't be Big Ho, Little Ho.
But no, yeah. So what you wanted actually
Abby to be kind of a tomboy, because also initially Angel was much more kind of overtly sexual.
Yeah, she was. And so we made her, you know, very different. And so what you're seeing is relationships between us and our sisters and theirs. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? It's just different things that we put in the script to make a sisterly bond feel authentic.
Yeah, we would say like, is that more of like a, I'll use my sisters for example, like, is that more of like a Naomi thing to do? And he's like, no, I think that's more of like, I think she's more like Jessica. Like we knew our sisters really, really well. And in fact, like, you know, it's also interesting because one of the things we wanted to do was, on the one hand, make sure, first, to make sure that, or to hope that this would speak to somebody who had a similar experience to Angel first. And then also, for somebody who hasn't, to be able to see themselves in Angel, and hope that this could generate some empathy for somebody like Angel. So it was important to us that that Angel could be a universal character. I get frustrated when films like this are like niche films. Like, why can't this be a mainstream? Why can't this be a mainstream drama? I don't fully understand why. I'm not saying because this particular one is so great, but like you guys know what I'm saying. And but anyway, so there were all these nice moments where it was also nice for me when we were making a character that's so specific with experiences that I haven't had, when I could also see my own truth in it too, so that way I knew on set I could really feel the honesty. I knew I could get inside of it too. So for instance, like the hair, we love.
I was just about to bring that up too. Yeah, the natural.
They were playing with the hair because both of us, in fact, played with our sister's hair. I did a lot of braiding with my sister's hair. Like it's one of my most intimate memories with my sisters are doing each other's hair. Now, of course, to not be aware and be really respectful of the fact that it's not the same, and you are now. I'm a white person directing black characters, and we're now having a scene where they're playing with each other's hair. I have to be very conscious of the fact that it's just multi-layered in a different way. That there's a history of fetishization, stigma, and also incredible celebration. Was really important for me to try to be as respectful and knowledgeable of the subtext of all of that as I possibly could, and also at the same time recognize that that's a beautiful thing about that's an intimate and beautiful human thing for everybody to be able to find themselves an angel. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yes.
First of all, I love this film. And I want to say I appreciate the advice on writer's block. I'll be driving right after this. As far as like directing, was there a particularly hard scene for you to direct? And if so, what did you do?
She was asking if there was a particularly hard scene to direct, and so what did you do?
I mean, to be totally honest, this being my first film, all of them. The bus. If you guys are writing any scripts and you have a scene on a bus, put them somewhere else. Oh, it's just the worst. Because we had this incredible line producer who worked so hard to scout the highways to make sure that we were going to be driving on them when there wasn't any traffic, because the whole point of being on the bus is to have the movement outside the windows. And it's like every time we got on that bus, there was construction that like was not listed on like the highway thing or whatever. So we're just sitting there, and then you're like, oh, and a bus driver was like trying to let the cars go so we would get like a little bit of running. Like, say your line really fast. Okay, good. Okay, do it again. Okay. And you're like trying to get some run for the actors to get into a kind of a performance. So just on a logistical level, that was just really frustrating, because it just got in the way of what was important, which was for the actors to feel free. Speaking of which, that was one of the things that my cinematographer and I talked a lot about, which was how can we minimize the lights, to everything, as much as we could, so that where the equipment is, so that the actors could just really have some freedom and not be, not be hindered. But the bus is just the worst for that. And then one of the scenes that I thought was going to be the most difficult, but was the most exciting and my favorite scene in the film, was the beach. In our minds, and I don't know why, we wrote the beach scene as if we were like in the Caribbean. It was like warm water, and there's like this perfect wave, and they jump over it, and all this stuff. And then we started like scouting, and I was like, what beach were we thinking of, and because it's like, and it's certainly, on the Atlantic, even we shot that in last July, and we saved it to the very end of our shoot so the water would be as warm as possible. But that water was freezing. Those waves were big. It was choppy. It was freezing. Oh my God, they were so brave and so with those waves. We made the scene about like we had written a whole scene where like Angel's a little bit scared because of the waves. Because we sort of appreciated that she's getting over something. But then Dom was so fearless that I just like that the scene became completely different because of what the two actors brought. They just were so strong and mighty in those waves, and it was just so exciting that I didn't dare say like, okay, now let's get to how we wrote it, because sometimes that's really important, and sometimes it's kind of beautiful to see just how they, how what they built together kind of takes a scene to a whole nother level. And for me, they really did that.
Sorry, I know you've been waiting for a while.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the scheduling, because I mean, you had presumably short days because of Tatum. You had a lot of locations. It seems like a lot of a challenge for a small movie like this.
I wish my producers were here right now to hear you say that. They would be so happy that finally somebody is noticed, because they really did some hard work on that. Yeah, we had kind of thought that we had written this simple film because there's no, pyrotechnics or anything like that, except for the fireworks that we paid some dude like $20 in the street to be like, can you do that again? I think actually we only had like $10 to give him, yeah, because every scene is, and so this was what I was talking about time, and this is where we knew we would need time, because the actors gave us that rehearsal time, which was very generous of them. Because every scene is in a different location, and because I'm pretty detailed, like I really love locations, and I want each location to be something special, because the other answer is just group a lot of locations in one area, or like, just make one location be possible to have 5 different locations in it. And I like to make things more difficult than that. So they just, honestly, they had magic wands, like, but we had 28 days. And typically films under $1 million, now people are trying to do them in 17 days. And I just don't understand that. You spend years lining up a film, and then you're trying to catch it in 17 days. Like, I just don't understand that. I would much rather have not 5 lenses, but 3 lenses, or, not, we gotta lose the drone shot. Anyway, everybody's got a drone shot now anyway, just trying to be really economical on everything else, so that way we could protect those days, so that way we didn't have to shoot in super generic locations, so that way we didn't have to try to cram, every day. But yeah, so Tatum had, she could only work, something like 9 hours a day, and then of those 9 hours, 3 hours had to be with a tutor, a set tutor. So we had 6 hours with her, but that's including wardrobe, hair, and lunch, and everything. So you only have I feel like you have 25 minutes to shoot with, you know what I mean, with Tatum. Luckily, she was very professional, and there was one moment. Sorry, now I'm going down anecdote lane, but where she was so good with her knowing her lines that one moment Tatum or Dom was like, "Hey, we got this scene coming up. You want to run lines?" And Tatum said, "I mean, I don't need to, but if you'd like to." And she was totally earned it. She was just being sweet, you know what I mean? She was being nice to Dom, and Dom was like, "Oh, fuck being a little bitch. Not really, but but it was just, yeah, Tatum, so luckily Tatum was on top, but yeah, it was just, so that was for the days, that's why we needed so many days.
Well, you had a lot of nights in there too.
Exactly, because we had to go into splits as well. And then we had this thing where we had this schedule perfectly lined up because the father was on Broadway in the play Sweat. So we had to work out like with Broadway to get his understudy to do a couple of shows because we needed him to do nights because we couldn't really afford to black out the windows in a way that would look good because if you just kind of do, you want to be able to tent them so that way there's a little bit of atmosphere outside, all of this stuff. We just wouldn't be able to afford to do that, so we had to do it nights. And also because we wanted there to be this car light going through and all this stuff. So we had to, so we had this very intricately planned schedule and Broadway was helping us and all this stuff. And then the night before, we had this great location, and the night before we were meant to shoot there, the person that owned that house said, my brother, and who signed the contract with us, said, my brother's back in town, I guess he just got out of jail, and he's the actual owner, and he says we can't shoot there. And we're like, but it's tomorrow. And our production designer had been there for 4 days, setting the whole, setting the whole thing up, and now this guy's coming back, and she was just like, wait, what's happening? And we're like, clear the stuff out, like let's get out of the house. And so then we had to scout a whole new house, and so we had to go dark actually for a day. Which is a really big deal for a film our size. And we had to call Broadway and say like, hey, can we have John next week? Which was not great. And so that was a frustrating moment. But again, like, there's something beautiful when you're making a film this size where it's really all hands on deck and everybody in the crew realizes that everybody needs to do everything they can to make a film like this happen. And I'm really grateful to the crew that we had who did that because everybody got in their cars the next day and drove around and started knocking on doors to find good houses and texting pictures and saying, what do you think about this? And I mean, that was just a really moving thing that happened, so, and then it ended up being great, the house that we got and everything like that, it was really perfect, but it was, yeah, sorry, way too long to answer that question.
You mentioned Ramin Barani, who's one of the best in the business at making strong character dramas with very little resources, and I'm curious to know if that relationship sort of lasted beyond the screenwriting lab, or if at the time of that he was making any suggestions that might help to anticipate these kinds of problems.
So he was one of my teachers at Columbia. And then when I graduated, he became just like, I just sort of kept bothering him basically, and so he stayed a kind of a mentor. Yes, he had wonderful advice. When he saw me going down the road of having the agents submit it to production companies that would take 3 weeks to read it and not read it and then say that they read it and then say that they just can't do it because they already did a female film last year and they can only do one, that would take 2 years and you would keep having this dangling carrot in front of you and you'll go nuts and they're not speaking your language and you need to find routes outside of that and you need to make it for cheap enough that you don't need to wait and you need to set a date. and on that date, you're going to start shooting that film, whether you have $10 or $1 million. Because otherwise years will pass. And so that I thought was very good advice.
All right, there was one more question. Did you?
This being your first time directing, how has your experience as an actor influenced the making of it?
I think just appreciating what actors are doing when they might need some help, kind of finding another angle to come at it with the dialogue, or when there's something that in the scene is like needs some restructuring once you get it on its feet, and trying to figure out like what that actor needs. I think I have a sense of when the actor needs just a push out of their comfort level, and when the material that they're giving them is just not quite kind of working. I think that was a pretty helpful thing for me to have a sense of that. At least I think I had a sense of that.
Okay, so August 3rd for sure at the Lemley NoHo, and available on video on demand the same day. So tell people about it. Hopefully to get them out to the theater, but of course VOD is
You can watch it. Yeah, no, I just want to say, guys, it's very late, and it's really meaningful that you guys came out to watch this film, that you stayed to listen to us chat, and it really is a passion project, and it really, word of mouth is truly meaningful. So if you liked it, please let a friend or two know. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for coming.